Good morning, everybody. I'll go ahead and call to order the meeting of the License and Variance Board for Wednesday, December 9th, 2020. My name is Roy Acree. I'm the fire chief here with the city. To my left is Frank Martin, the Director of Public Works. Excuse me. To his left is Richard Garland, the Director of Parks and Rec. We also have Tina Monahan with us here as a board member for official meeting minutes. The first item on the agenda is item 3A, Privilege License Agent Ownership Change Request, LIC 2020-2021, 1651 Roswell Street, Nadia 4 LLC, DBA G&M Package Store with Gautam Debnath as agent. Is the applicant present? Representative of the applicant. Okay. So I guess since the applicant is not present, I'm going to call for a motion to table indefinitely until such time the applicant can be present.
I make a motion to table privilege license LIC 2020-21 beer and wine and liquor retail package 1651 Roswell Street, Nadia LLC, G&M Package Store, Gautam Debnath as agent.
Second.
We have a motion to table that's been seconded. If there's no further discussion, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor of the motion? All those opposed? Mr. Garland, you in favor of the
I'm
motion?
in favor. I'm
okay.
sorry, sir.
Thank you. Motion passes 3-0. So if the applicant, Tina, correct me if I'm wrong here. So if the applicant comes in, then we could probably go ahead and hear it near the end of the agenda, even though we've just tabled this, because we did it indefinitely. Does that make sense? Okay. All right, next item on the agenda is item 3B, Privilege License, Agent Change Request, LIC 2020-23, Beer, Wine, and Liquor, 2876 Spring Hill Parkway, HTP TRS SPES 2, try to say that fast. DBA Hyatt Place Atlanta Cobb Gallery with Matthew Shine as the agent, replacing Timothy Burns. So is the applicant present or the representative? If you could please step forward. You're going to step forward to the podium. Make sure the red light is on. You'll have to push the button. And for the record, if you could state your name.
Yeah. Matthew Shine.
Good morning.
Good morning.
So you are going to be the registered agent for Hyatt Place Atlanta Cobb Galleria.
Yes, sir.
Is that right? Okay. So could you just kind of describe your role to the board with the company?
Yes, so I'm the general manager of the hotel, essentially the highest committee member on property, and I oversee all aspects, so the room as well as the food and beverage, including the alcohol, beer, and wine.
Okay. Can you talk to us about maybe some corporate practices that you guys have in place that ensures the responsible sale of alcohol?
In addition to the requirements by COB in the city of Smyrna, Hyatt does have training courses that all of our bartenders are required to complete prior to serving. In addition, just cleanliness practices, especially with COVID going on, trainings to identify people that may be intoxicated prior to coming to the bar to get a drink, trainings on how to deal with someone who is intoxicated, and just looking for signs and things of that sort in order to ensure that we do not overserve anybody.
So what's your practices with regards to ensuring the legal age of the person?
So we ID everybody regardless of age, whether they're 21 or 75. We ID everybody.
And that's something that you as manager and the ultimate person responsible, you're going to ensure that, right?
That's correct.
Okay. Any questions for the applicant? So you have completed the responsible sales alcohol requirement, and for the record, a background check was done by the Smyrna Police Department. There was no findings within that investigation that would preclude the issuance of this privilege license. With that being said, if there's no further questions, I'll entertain a motion.
Motion to approve privilege license agent change request LIC 2020-23 beer, wine, and liquor, address 2876 Spring Hill Parkway Southeast, HPT TRS SPES 2, doing business as Hyatt Place Atlanta Cobb Galleria with Matthew Shine as agent. Timothy Burns was the previous agent.
I second.
We have a motion to approve privilege license request. It's been properly seconded. If there's no further discussion, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor of the motion? Motion passes unanimously. Good luck.
Thank you so much.
Next item on the agenda is, somehow we've skipped 3C. Tina, did you see that? Yeah, it's out of order. That's fine. I'm going to go ahead and call C, okay? Item 3C, public hearing V20-068. Reduce the side setback from 10 feet to 1 feet, land lot 560-2790 Walker Court, Christie Sheehan. Is the applicant present? If you could please step forward, state your name for the record. And you can feel free to either leave your mask on or take it off while you're at the podium, whatever you're comfortable with.
Thank you. Christy Sheehan.
Hey, good morning.
Good morning.
So could you just kind of briefly describe the need for this variance for the reduction in side setback?
Yes, so we purchased this property and we are in the process of renovating it to flip it and upgrade the property significantly. And there was an original carport on there that was in horrible shape. And so we just wanted to replace that and put it in line with something that's new and, you know, in line with what the house should have in order to cover a car.
Okay. Okay, we may have some questions for you in just a minute, but if you would just have a seat, I'm going to call up staff for some background.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Good morning. Caitlin Crow, Planner 1, Community Development. So I do want to correct. It does say from 10 feet to 1 feet on the variance. This variance is actually V20-068 to reduce the side setback from 10 feet to 2 feet for a carport. The current survey did update it from 1 feet to 2
feet. Okay, so it's 10 to 2.
Correct.
Okay.
So the subject property is 0.28 acres on the west side of Walker Court, right near the intersection of Walker Court and Walker Street. The applicant is proposing to replace the carport as part of a larger renovation to the existing house, as Mrs. Sheehan mentioned. Section 801 requires a side setback in the R15 zoning district of 10 feet. So the applicant was originally permitted to start a 2-story structure that was going to be added to the home, and the original building permit did not include the replacement of the carport. The applicant did decide to change the scope of the work for the building permit and decided to remove the existing carport and started construction without a new permit on the new carport. The adjoining neighbor did call in a code complaint, which talked about the encroachment of the carport into the side setback. Code enforcement did go out there, verified this encroachment, and put a stop work order. So that brings us to today. So the applicant is requesting this variance to finish the construction of a new 23.4 feet by 12 feet carport, which is overall 280 square feet. The original carport that was removed was 21 by 10 feet, which was 210 square feet. And it also encroached into the side setback by roughly 9 feet, leaving that foot difference.
So it was already existing non-compliant with the old carport?
That is correct.
Right.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
So, and then although the new carport does have a larger overall footprint, it was actually shifted forwards on the property, which made the difference 2 feet, so actually extended it just a little bit. This did effectively eliminate any further encroachment to the neighboring property. So that being said, the rear corner of the carport is the narrowest point, and that'll be 2 feet from the adjoining property line. The current survey does say 2.7, but we do have to take into account the gutter system that will be installed. So the setback encroachment reduces as you move forward in the carport. And additionally, the adjacent home to the south, which is closest to that carport, exceeds the minimum 10 feet distance. It's actually 13 feet from the carport, so no fire suppression system is needed. So due to the geometry of the subject property in relation to the orientation of the home, a carport or other covered parking would be unable to be located anywhere else on the property without the necessity of a variance. Thus, due to the location of the existing driveway, which is also already encroaching, it's only about a foot away from the property line, and the orientation of the home, the most logical area would be to replace the carport in the same area to decrease any further land disturbance to the actual property or the surrounding neighbors. So staff believes the variance proposed is the minimum variance needed to create covered parking on the subject property. The proposed plan uses the existing driveway and locates the carport in the general area that the original carport occupied, and it was there for several years. The hardship is not self-created since the home and driveway were originally constructed prior to the city's enactment of the zoning code. And similar variances have been approved earlier in 2020 at 3647 Ashwood and at 2754 Sanford, also earlier in 2020. Community development has received several calls from the adjacent neighbor to the south in opposition to this request. It has been properly posted with no site distance issues. So, in conclusion, after reviewing the variance application, staff does support the request and recommends approval to reduce the side setback from 10 feet to 2 feet with the following 3 stipulations. 1, approval of the subject property for the requested variance shall be conditioned upon the development of the property in substantial compliance with the site plans submitted with the variance application. 2, gutters and downspouts shall be installed on the carport to manage stormwater runoff and to divert water away from adjacent properties. And number 3, the carport shall be painted with flame retardant paint. And with that, I can answer any questions.
Any questions for Ms. Crow? Okay,
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Caitlin. Ms. Sheehan, if you could please step forward. So you just heard Ms. Crow read into record kind of a background about the project. Essentially, when you acquired the property, and Caitlin, correct me if any of this was wrong, but you had an existing non-compliant carport that was roughly 21 by 10 feet. And you decided to go ahead. Now, you know, you have to permit this stuff, right?
So I'm learning, this
Yeah.
is our first
Okay, so
go
don't
at
do
flipping a
work
home.
that's
Correct.
unpermitted. Yeah, that's a
Right.
big no-no. So you had this 21 by 10 existing non-compliant. You're replacing it with roughly a 23.5 by 12. You heard Ms. Crow read into record the conditions near
Yes,
the
sir.
end of her presentation. Are you aware of those, and do you agree to those conditions?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Any questions from the board for Ms. Sheehan?
No, sir.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
So this is a public hearing. If there's anybody here that would like to either speak for or against V20-068, I'd ask that you step forward now. If you could please state your name for the record and your address.
My name is Sharice Cook. I own the property at 2798 Walker Court. I have been very upset about this whole situation when all of this construction occurred. Permitting, like Caitlin said, was not acknowledged. There was not any feedback given to the neighbors, the adjoining property. We have, at that point, permitting was not applied for, was not approved. They continue to work on the property, very upsetting to me. We have a lot of issues with water on this property. There's a creek that runs behind Walker Court, Mimosa Circle, and it starts out on Morris Circle. So we've had a lot of excess runoff with a lot of the construction that's going on. There were 4 houses that were built on Walker Court and Mimosa Circle. They were required to put in a retention pond. There was another property built at 2804 Walker Court. They had a lot of issues with the water runoff. They were required to put in permeable products to not actually put a driveway in, but it was more
Like an impervious surface type thing.
exactly.
Yeah.
Okay, so right now we've got a problem with my front yard being flooded out. The house at 2790 is on a slope, and if you look at the pictures, that are attached to this application, their house is on a slope, and in the last month, we've had mud that has come from that property onto my property. There was no silt fencing, which if they had put in, applied for a variance, this all would have been addressed prior to the actual construction and add-on to the property. So we were not given the opportunity to do, any feedback or anything, which I'm still very upset about. So at this point, they were fined because they did not apply for the permitting to continue working, and they continued to work for an additional 2 weeks in the property, even after a stop order sign was put out on the property. So my feeling is they're being rewarded for bad behavior and not looking into every code that is in place in the city of Smyrna. Over the years, I have really prided the city of Smyrna on any construction that goes on. They've had rules. My company, I've worked for general contractors for 30 years. When we built a building on 4581 South Cobb Drive, we were required to make sure there was silt fencing in place. There was no mud that came onto South Cobb Drive. So right now, with everything that's going on, it appears to me that Smyrna is not taking care of the residents. They're going more for the contractors that are coming in and building. So with all this being said, if this is to be approved, I have a couple of stipulations that I would like put into place. The gutters must be installed on each side of the property. Like I said, the house is sitting on a slope. Every bit of water that runs off goes into my property. We have been flooded out in the front yard, in the backyard, and the water overflow from my yard goes to the other house on 2804 Walker Court. I would also like that the gutters be attached to some type of a French drain or some type of a system that moves the water to the creek behind the property. I would also like to add that I would like silt fencing putting in immediately because I have mud continually coming into my property. Also, the contractors that have been in there have been dumpsters in place, but there's still trash running into my property. So at this point, I'm not very, very happy with this contractor. That's pretty much what I have to say.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Cook. Is anybody else present that would like to either speak for or against item V20-068? Good, sir. If you could state your name and your address for the record, please.
I'm Warren Washington. I'm the general
You might have
contractor.
to remove your mask.
I'm Warren Washington. I'm the general contractor for 2790.
Okay.
We pulled a permit. It was permit pulled at first. Then we came back and pulled another permit. And then we had to go get plans and stuff drawn up, so we pulled another permit. It just made me pay $895 for another permit.
Well, that's,
Yeah, I understand. That's
there
no
was
problem.
work being done outside the
Yeah.
scope of the
But-
permit, right?
When they put the stop work on the building, we stopped work immediately.
Okay.
We no longer continued to work on the property. Okay? So I don't know why she's saying that we was working because we wasn't.
Okay.
We went in to pick up extra material that we had left on the property. We just came and picked that up.
Okay.
But we never continued working on the property.
Okay.
All right?
Thank you, sir. Ms. Crowe. So in the second, I think it was one of the stipulations about gutters and downspouts. Can you just kind of, it's my understanding that, we put these, that's a common stipulation, but, there is a stormwater runoff consideration that is reviewed by the city engineer with consideration to negative impacts on other properties and all that type of stuff. That's correct, right?
That is correct, yes.
Yeah. So as part of the normal staff process through this, those considerations about how, especially on properties where the impervious surface is increased significantly, right? Which I don't, correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think that's the case with this one. I know the roof over a 23.5 by 12 is going to be a little bit bigger than the one over a 21 by 10, but in general, the impervious surface is just a little bit bigger, right? So the whole how the gutters and downspouts capture and divert the rainwater this way or that way. That's all part of a normal process overseen by the city engineer, right?
Correct. And the impervious surface area, we have the cap, as you guys are well aware, of 35%. This property is nowhere near that. It extends quite a bit in the back. So the reason that that stipulation was added in this particular case is because it was so close to the property line. So that's why it's a common occurrence, but it doesn't have to do with impervious surface in this particular case.
Right. So also, could you or either Mr. Martin speak to, how, in general, when we decide to enforce the need for silt fencing and when not? Is that just more of a commercial property type thing, or is it with residential improvements as well?
So that does fall in the engineering department's purview, but typically any type of grading permit does require silt fencing. In this case, because the addition has not been approved just yet, that won't occur until after this meeting, there wouldn't be a requirement for that. But if there is an issue with mud, I think the environmental technician would be willing to go out there to assess the need for silt fencing. And if that's the case, that would be a requirement from the engineering department.
Okay. Anybody have any questions either for staff or for the applicant? Okay, thank you. Okay, last call. If there's anybody here who'd like to either speak for or against V20-068, I'd ask that you step forward at this time. Ms. Cook, do you have any additional new information? Okay, because what we're not going to get into is a back and forth debate about, factual stuff.
Okay,
Opinions of factual things. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Rebutting what the contractor just said, I made calls and emails to the city marshal on about 8 different times, and the reason they had to go back and get the permit is because they were working against a nonstop order. If you will check with the city marshal, with Rusty Martin, with Travis Lindley, and with the mayor, they have received emails from me in dispute of what the contractor just said. I'm not going to do a piss and moan contest here, but that is incorrect.
Okay,
So I just want to say that is not correct.
thank you. Okay. I'm going to close the public hearing portion at this time. If there's no further questions for staff or the applicant, I'm going to entertain a motion for V20-068.
I'll make a motion to approve public hearing V20-68, reduce the side setback from 10 foot to 2 foot, land lot 560 at 2790 Walker Court.
Second.
We have a motion to approve that's been properly seconded. If there's no further discussion, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor of the motion? None opposed. Motion passes unanimously. Next item on the agenda is item 3D, V20-064, to allow encroachment into 50-foot undisturbed stream buffer land lot 556-3361 Lee Street. Kevin J. Wood is the applicant. Is the applicant present? I'm right here. Mr. Wood, if you could please step forward and state your name for the record.
Remove my mask.
Good morning.
Morning. My name is Kevin Wood. I live at 3361 Lee Street.
Okay, so just briefly describe the project and the need for the variance.
Yeah, so we're requesting a reduction in the stream buffer there from 50 to 25 feet is for an accessory structure. So we moved to Smyrna in 2014. At that time, it was just my wife and I. We've had 3 little girls since then, and so now we're a family of 5.
You guys have been busy, huh?
Yeah. And just a lot of loss of sleep, all of that kind of thing. Little girls run around. So they're 6, 4, and 2 now.
Yeah.
And the house seems smaller than it was.
Yeah.
And the original builder of the house, he didn't add a lot of storage space inside. And in addition to that, we were at Smyrna First United Methodist Church School. And when they went virtual, my wife was a Cobb County educator. We decided to homeschool this year. It's actually more challenging and space consuming than we thought, and we just decided we needed an accessory structure. Our impression was, since it's 12 by 14, so our impression was that it was exempt from regulations as a temporary or, a non-permanent accessory structure. So we didn't realize, we thought we were sort of in the clear. And we brought in the prefab structure and set it up. And then we were alerted by the city of Smyrna that we were in violation. So we wanted to apply for the variance. I don't know if it makes sense, but we have a mitigation plan. It's on here, site plan. So we were going to add 2 additional trees. And then there's going to be attractive landscaping. I can come and show you this afterwards if you like.
Right.
That we add around the structure. We don't believe it's an eyesore. It's set pretty far back from the street. As you can see in our site plan, our home is set very far back from the street. So we don't really see another logical location on our lot for a structure like that. And it would be kind of a hardship not to be able to have it, considering just our house is just full of stuff and kids.
Right.
And all of that. So we would greatly appreciate your consideration on this variance.
Thank you. Any questions at this time for Mr. Wood? Okay, if you could just have a seat. We may call you back up in a minute.
Yes, sir.
And for the background, Miss Caitlin Crow.
Stick my mask on real quick.
All right, again, Caitlin Crow, Planner 1, Community Development. Apologize, I don't have any nice posters, but that was probably the best we've seen. So this variance is V20-064 to encroach into the city's 50-foot undisturbed stream buffer. So this subject property is about 0.66 acres located on the east side of Lee Street. The applicant is requesting to encroach into the buffer to place the shed that Mr. Wood had mentioned. And stream buffers are controlled by Chapter 6, Article 4. So the applicant did place that new 168 square foot shed on the property earlier this year, which encroaches into not only the 50-foot undisturbed stream buffer, but also the 10-foot sewer easement that goes through his front yard. So the subject property is greatly impacted by not only the 50-foot undisturbed stream buffer, but also the state's 25-foot stream buffer and the city's 75-foot impervious surface setback. So they do require relief pretty much if they placed it anywhere on the property. And since the applicant is unable to expand the footprint of the home due to the stream buffers, the storage shed will greatly alleviate the need for further expansion in the future and further encroachment into the buffers. So, as Mr. Wood mentioned, the applicant is proposing to plant 2 additional trees as a means of stream buffer mitigation, and the city engineer has reviewed that plan and has approved it. The shed will remain within the sewer easement with the understanding that if work is to ever be required by the city of Smyrna, that the applicant may need to remove the shed at his or her own expense. Community development believes the hardship is not self-created, as the lot of record existed before the buffer ordinance was adopted. And the variance proposed is the minimum variance needed, and there's not going to be any negative impact on the adjacent properties. Community development has not received any calls in opposition to this request. It has been properly posted with no site distance issues. So after reviewing the variance application, staff does support the request and recommends approval to encroach into the city's 50-foot undisturbed stream buffer with the following 2 stipulations. 1, the mitigation plan, as approved by the city engineer, shall be implemented within 6 months from the date of this meeting. And 2, if the city of Smyrna must work within the sewer easement, the property owner may be required to move the shed at their own expense. And if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
So is this on Lee Street? Is that R15?
This one, I believe, is R20.
R20?
Yeah.
So I'm
Oh,
assuming...
it is R15, excuse me.
R15? So I'm assuming it's with regard to square footage, it's existing non-compliant with regard to square footage, like the house versus the R15, or is it not? Because you'd mentioned, well, either way, if I heard you right, because of the impact of all the buffers and the sewer easement, those things impact the majority of the lot as it stands now, right?
Correct.
So they can't really build out.
Correct.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. Any questions for Ms. Crow?
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Wood, if you could please come back up. So in Ms. Crow's presentation, you heard near the end the two stipulations read into record, essentially the mitigation efforts that you've had approved through the city's engineer has to be done within 6 months. And if the city ever has to come back there and do work on the sewer where that easement is, then the cost or impact to this accessory is going to be on you.
Yes, we understand that.
Good with that. And I know that our Public Works Director has visited, hadn't you? You've been out there, and I think he stated just for your knowledge, that infrastructure back there is relatively new. So fingers crossed, maybe we won't have to get back there for a bunch of years. Okay, anybody have any questions for the applicant? This is a public hearing. If there's anybody here that would like to speak either for or against V20-064, I ask that you step forward now. Good morning, sir. If you could please state your name and your address for the record.
Sure. Thanks, Roy. Hi, Frank. Richard. My name is Bruce Hallmuller. My wife and I, Virginia Davis, we live at the property directly behind 3361 Lee Street. We live at 3372 Pretty Branch Drive. We've lived there for 26 years. This shed was built on Wednesday, September 2nd, and I did call community development. I just let them know that something was going on that day, as once the contractor was up on the roof, they were actually in line of sight from my back deck. I believe they sent the marshals out. I'm not sure. There was a temporary shutdown that day from about 1 p.m. to 3 p.m., and then they continued to build the rest of the week. So I'm not here to say that I'm for or against, but it's the permit situation here. I mean, this shed was built 13 weeks ago, and now it's just coming to the variance board right now. Back in 1994, when I moved in, this area was a floodplain. It was in the county, and it was a floodplain. And I just recall the original builder had promised that they were going to put in a 72-inch pipe under the driveway that sits at this property right now, and it's only a 36-inch pipe that's in there. Folks up on Pretty Branch, I remember Joe Latanzi, Don Caswell, were all very upset with that, and some of the history of Smyrna, I guess Pretty Branch Creek did flood pretty bad in late 60s and 70s. So the construction of this shed itself, going against 3 different setbacks, concerns my wife and I. As I said, I'm not for or against. The woods are good neighbors, and I think there's more of an issue here of the permit process. And after hearing the first story, I was a little bit surprised that I basically had the same type of story, that folks are doing things without permission or permits throughout the city. That's all I have.
Thank you for those comments. I'll just say, we have right at 60,000 residents, and, in an ideal world, I think everybody would ensure that they have the appropriate permitting before they do anything. But the reality is, as you well know, it happens, all the time. And I think it speaks to our ability as a city with our code enforcement people to go out and ensure that those that are doing work that's unpermitted, that is eventually rectified through a formalized process. And in this case, through the License and Variance Board. So,
Can I ask Mr. Wood one question?
Really, what we're in right now is public hearing.
Okay.
So what that means is that you can come up and make a record, an official statement for the record. Sure. I don't think that there's a back and forth with if you guys are neighbors, if you wanted to, outside of this public hearing process, if you had questions for him, you guys are neighbors. You can ask him whatever you want.
No, it's just one question for the record. That's all I had.
Okay. Go ahead.
An hour later. Oh, just his line of work. Wanted to know what type of profession he's in.
I don't think that's relevant to this case, sir.
Okay.
Thank you. Anything else?
That's it, Roy.
Thank you. Any no questions for that? Okay. Anybody else here to speak either for or against V20-064? Okay, we'll close the public hearing. If there's no further questions either for the applicant or for staff, I'll entertain a motion for item 3D. I'm sorry.
Can I make
Ms.
a
Crowe,
statement
yeah.
real quick? I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
I do want to say, so this structure is 168 square feet, which is under 200. The ICC code does, in the code, it says that structures underneath 200 square feet do not require a building permit.
Right.
So this one, the marshals did go out after you had called, but it was zoning code that it was conflicting with, but it ultimately will still not get a building permit even after the hearing today.
Right, so the issue is not whether or not it's permitted, it's the need
Yeah, it's
for
the
a potential, right, the need for a potential variance.
Yeah,
Okay.
just wanted to make sure.
Thank you. Go ahead and entertain a motion for 3D.
Motion to approve V 20-068, allow encroachment into 50-foot undisturbed stream buffer, land lot 556-336, land lot 556 at 3361 Lee Street, Kevin J. Wood.
Second.
We have a motion to approve V 20-064, which has been seconded properly. If there's no further discussion, I'll call for a vote. All those in favor of the motion? Motion passes unanimously 3-0. Next item on the agenda is 3E, public hearing V 20-069, increase accessory building size from 25 to 45%, land lot 451, 995 McClendon Avenue. For Sam Whited is the applicant present. If you could please step forward and state your name for the record.
Hi, I'm Sam Whited, the owner of 995 McClendon Avenue.
Good morning.
Good morning.
So just like before, if you could just briefly describe the project and the need for the increase in building size.
Sure. The project is a small garage on my lot. My house was built before the current standards were set. It's roughly 960 square feet. With the existing accessory structure size, that would mean a maximum garage size of, I believe that's 240 square feet, which comes out to about a 12 by 20 garage, which is a one-car, it really is the minimum size for a one-car garage and is really too small to actually fit a standard one-car garage size door on the shorter end of the garage. So part of this is just that my house is very small, so the accessory structure size is too small. The reason I need a garage at all is that my driveway is directly under a large oak tree, which is one of the primary reasons I bought the property. It's a beautiful tree, but unfortunately also means my car is rather full of dents. I also work on bicycles and sometimes on mechanical work just in my spare time as a hobby, and have several bicycles that I like to work on. I currently do that out of a very small shed on the property that will be removed if I have the ability to build the garage. And having that more space for that would be very beneficial.
So you have not already begun this project, is that
That's
right?
correct.
Thank you for that.
For what it's worth, in response to the last two people, this is the first time I have ever lived in the suburbs. I've always been, in Midtown Atlanta, where you have to get a permit to do anything because you're, in a condos and neighbors on top of you, or out in the middle of nowhere where nobody cares and there are almost no regulations. So I was very surprised by the permit process too, but luckily I was preempted by my contractor who let me know that I would need approval for this. So.
Okay. Any questions at this time for the applicant? Thank you, sir. If you could have a seat, we'll call
Thank
you
you.
back in a minute. And for the background, Ms. Caitlin Crowe.
All right. Caitlin Crowe, Planner 1, Community Development. So this variance is V20-069 to increase the accessory building size from 25% to 45% of the primary dwelling. So this subject property is 0.26 acres located on the south side of Medlin Street, right at the intersection of Evelyn Street and McClendon Avenue. So it effectively has 3 road frontages, which makes it a little bit more complex. So the applicant is requesting to increase the accessory building size for that construction of a detached garage, as Mr. White had said. The maximum accessory structure size is required based upon the standards associated with Section 501 of the zoning code. So the applicant is proposing to build a 432 square foot detached garage on the Evelyn Street side of the property to store his vehicle as well as his tools, as he mentioned. The existing shed on the property will be removed to make way for the new detached garage, so no second accessory structure variance is required. The proposed garage will have cement siding with a shingle roof, painted to match the existing home. And to access the new structure, the applicant will be using the existing driveway that's currently off of Evelyn Street. So the existing one-story home is 964 square feet, which means that the garage proposed does exceed the allowable accessory structure size by 20% based off that primary structure's square footage. However, the minimum square foot of an R15 zoned house is 2,000 square feet. As you can see, this is well below that, so that if the house were of the required size, this variance wouldn't even be required. So thus the hardship is not self-created. A similar variance request was actually approved next door to this property at 989 McClendon Avenue in 1990 to also install a detached garage very similar to this same situation. And community development has not received any calls in opposition to this particular request. It has been properly posted with no site distance issues per the city engineer. So after reviewing the variance application, staff does support the request and recommends approval to increase the accessory building size from 25% to 45% of the primary dwelling with the following stipulation. Approval of the subject property for the requested variance shall be conditioned upon the development of the property in substantial compliance with the site plan and elevations submitted with the variance application. And with that, I can answer any questions.
So just one clarification. Should this be approved and built with the proposed 432 square foot garage, the total impervious surface is still going to be within limits?
Correct.
Right?
It'll still be under 35%.
Under 35, okay. And you mentioned two conditions, and I heard the first standard stipulation, you've got to build it the way you say you're going to. What was the second one?
It was just the
Oh,
one
it's just the
stipulation
one?
for this one.
Okay.
Yes, correct.
So there's no stipulation on gutters and downspouts?
No, correct, because it's not close to any property line.
Okay. Any questions for Ms. Crowe?
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Whited, if you could please step forward. So just like the other ones you've heard before yours, you've heard Ms. Crowe read into record the background, and at the end, she talked about the stipulation that essentially says that when you apply for this, and you have to build it based off of within substantial compliance of the way you said you were going to in the plan submitted. So do you agree with that and okay with that stipulation?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. Any other questions for the applicant? This is a public hearing. If there's anybody that would like to either speak for or against V20-069, I'd ask that you step forward at this time. Seeing no one step forward, I'll entertain a motion for 3E.
I make a motion to approve V20-069, increase accessory building size from 25% to 45%, land lot 451, 995 McClendon Avenue.
Second.
Have a motion approved. It's been properly seconded. If there's no further discussion, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor of the motion? Motion passes unanimously. Next item on the agenda is item 3F, public hearing V20-070, reduction of driveway setback from 5 feet to 2.4 feet, land lot 557, 3279 Lee Street. Jeff and Amy Carter is the applicant present. Mr. Carter, if you could please step forward. And for the record, if you could state your name.
Good morning. My name is Jeff Carter.
Good morning. So if you could please just briefly describe the need for the reduction in the driveway setback.
We designed a house with a side entry, and our builder said that we could pour to the driveway, but as we started going through the process, we realized that the R20 zoning required a 5-foot setback for your driveway. So that made it the same size as the radius we have now at our current house, and my wife keeps hitting the garage when she pulls in. So I'm hoping that this extra 2.5 feet will let her swing a little wider and save the paint on her bumper.
You sure it's her? Like, I've seen you drive before. I'm just kidding. Okay. Any questions for Mr. Carter? Thank you. Ms. Caitlin Crowe for the background.
All right, Caitlin Crowe, Planner 1, Community Development. So this variance is V20-070 to reduce that driveway setback from 5 feet to 2.4 feet. So this subject property is 0.41 acres located on the east side of Lee Street as well. So the applicant is requesting to reduce that driveway setback for the construction of a new house that is currently underway. The development standards established by the city for the R20 zoning district does require that minimum driveway setback of 5 feet, as Mr. Carter mentioned. The applicant has demolished the existing single-family home and again is in the process of constructing a new one at this time. It will have a side entry garage, so the applicant would like to reduce that driveway setback to get that necessary turning radius to access this side entry garage. So as the driveway does approach Lee Street, the driveway setback does increase to about 10 feet using the existing curb cut of the original driveway. Community Development believes that the variance requested is the minimum needed to build a new home with a side entry garage. Community Development also doesn't foresee any negative impacts to adjacent properties should this be approved. And then similar variances have been requested and approved in the nearby Dunn Street. We actually have three, two from 2016 and one recently in 2020 at 3105 Dunn Street. It has been properly posted with no site distance issues. So after reviewing this variance application, staff does support the request and recommends approval to reduce the driveway setback from 5 feet to 2.4 feet with the following one stipulation. Approval of the subject property for the requested variance shall be conditioned upon the development of the property in substantial compliance with the site plan that was submitted with the variance application. And with that, I can answer any questions.
Any questions for Ms. Crowe?
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Carter, if you could, please. So you heard Ms. Crowe read into record the one stipulation. Are you aware of and in agreement with that stipulation?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. This is a public hearing. If there's anybody here that'd like to speak for or against V20-070, I'd ask that you step forward at this time. Seeing no one, I'll entertain a motion.
Motion to approve V20-70, reduction of driveway setback from 5 feet to 2.4 feet, land lot 557, 3279 Lee Street, Jeff and Amy Carter.
Second.
We have a motion to approve V20-70 that's been properly seconded. If there's no further discussion, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor? Motion passes unanimously. Next item on the agenda is item 3G, public hearing V20-071, allow reduction of the front setback from 35 to 28 feet. Land lot 449, 2800 Sanford Road. April Reed is the applicant. Is the applicant present? Good morning. If you could state your name.
Good morning. My name's John Jordan. I live at 2805 Sanford, and I'm the project manager for 2800 Sanford.
Okay, so you're here on behalf of the applicant, Ms. Reed?
Yes, sir.
Okay, if you could please describe to the board the need for the front setback reduction.
The homeowner has an existing front stoop that's on the house. It's about 3 feet by 4 feet, so just barely enough to stand on and come into the house. And they'd like a usable front porch that they could sit on that's covered, that looks nice and fitting with the neighborhood.
Okay, any questions for the applicant? Thank you. If you could have a seat. Background from Ms. Caitlin Crowe, please.
All right, we're almost there. So, Caitlin Crowe, Planner 1, Community Development. So this variance is V20-071 to reduce the front setback from 35 feet to 28 feet. So this subject property is 0.25 acres located on the west side of Sanford Road. The applicant is requesting this variance to rebuild and extend the front porch at 2800 Sanford Road. The minimum front setback is required based on the standards from Section 801 for the R15 zoning district. The applicant is proposing to construct a new 112 square foot front porch with a metal roof. It'll be 18 by 6 feet. The existing 24 square foot front porch will be demolished and will be replaced by this new one to become a usable front porch. Currently, it's about enough just to stand on. So the home is currently non-conforming, sitting 34.6 feet from the front property line. So it's non-conforming, but just barely. The applicant proposes the new front porch will be about 28.6 feet from the front property line and will encroach on the front setback by 6.4 feet. The existing home was constructed in 1955 prior to the adoption of the zoning ordinance and does have that existing non-conforming front setback. Community Development believes the variance requested is the minimum variance needed to create a usable front porch in that front yard. We, as staff, do not foresee any negative impacts to adjoining neighbors should this variance be approved. And for this one as well, similar variances have been approved just on the road next door at Fraser Street. In this case, there's four. There was one in 2013, and then 3 in 2019, so fairly recently as well. It has been properly posted with no site distance issues. So after reviewing the variance application, staff does support this request and recommends approval to reduce the front setback from 35 feet to 28 feet with the following one stipulation. Approval of the subject property for the requested variance shall be conditioned upon the development of the property in substantial compliance with the site plan submitted with the variance application. With that, I can answer any questions.
Any questions for Ms. Crowe?
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Sir, if you could please step back. You just heard Ms. Crowe read into record the one stipulation. It basically says you have to build it the way you say you're going to build it. Are you aware of that and in agreement with that stipulation?
I think we're fine with everything. 6 by 18 is what was said. I think the plans actually show like 18.6 on the width. The depth of it is the same, 6 foot. Nothing's changed there. Do we have a little bit of variation there, a few inches one way or the other, as long as it's not major difference there? How close are we?
I think the variance request in front of us is to reduce it from 35 feet to 28 feet.
Okay, that
on the
won't
front
change the actual width of the deck, which is the 18 part. It would change this way. The depth would not change. We're going to be right at that 6 foot.
Right, I think if Ms. Crowe, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think the 6 foot depth is what they're measured because it's a front setback.
Right, that's correct.
Right.
So that part, we'll make sure that we're right there, and that's the actual deck size, and then there's the step that's coming off. There's one single step that'll be in the front, just a standard single one step up.
Okay.
That will be in front of that 6, so that's included in that as well. Okay.
Any questions for the applicant? This is a public hearing. If there's anybody here that'd like to speak either for or against V20-071, I'd ask that you'd step forward at this time. Seeing no one, I'll entertain a motion.
Make a motion to approve V20-071, allow reduction of the front setback from 35 feet to 28 feet. Land lot 449, address 2800 Sanford Road.
Second.
We have a motion to approve that's been properly seconded. If there's no further discussion, I'll call for a vote. All those in favor of the motion? Motion passes unanimously. Good luck.
Great. Thank you very much.
Next item on the agenda is item 3H, public hearing V20-072, allow rear setback reduction from 30 feet to 15 feet for land lot 306, 1068 Oaks Parkway for Barefoot Decks LLC as the applicant. Is the applicant present? Good morning, sir. If you could please state your name for the record.
David Balzer with Barefoot Decks.
I'm sorry, could you spell your name?
Balzer, B-A-L-Z-E-R.
Okay. So if you could just kind of briefly describe the project that requires this setback reduction.
When we went to pull the permit for this particular deck replacement, the homeowner had actually gotten a warning from the city marshal that she needed to replace or repair her deck. So she contracted with us to replace the deck. We pulled up all the zoning records, realized that her current deck built existing on the house, the deck was 8 feet past the buildable line. Okay. All right. So we applied for the variance so that we can go ahead and put in, instead of a 2-foot deep deck, put in a 12-foot deep deck back onto this house.
So from 10 to 12 on the depth, is that right?
Yeah, so originally she had 10 foot out. We had contracted at 12 foot out. Speaking with Caitlin, we realized that, yes, they would support that, so we went ahead and left it with a contracted 12-foot out.
Okay,
The property line is, or the build line is actually 2 foot off the back of her house.
right. Any questions for the applicant? Thank you. If you could have a seat. And Ms. Crowe for the background.
All right, we've reached the last one. So this variance is B20-072 to reduce the rear setback from 30 feet to 15 feet. So the subject property is 0.12 acres, located on the northern end of the intersection of Oaks Parkway and Poplar Point. So the applicant is requesting the variance to rebuild and extend the deck at the rear of the single-family townhome over there on Oaks Parkway. So the minimum rear setback in this case is actually required upon the standards associated with the recorded plat of Oaks of Concord, dated November 7th, 1984. So the applicant is proposing to demo and rebuild a 228 square feet elevated deck at the rear of the existing home. And the existing deck, so they're going to build the 228 square foot. The existing deck is 190 square feet and is currently 8 feet from the rear property line. Strict application of the zoning ordinance would prohibit the applicant from rebuilding her deck, period. And as Mr. Bowser said, only 2 feet of the deck would be allowed, which is not a usable outdoor space. And again, this is a townhome, so outdoor space is at a premium. So additionally, since this property is a corner lot, the applicant wouldn't even be able to put it on the other side of the property because of the same setback constraints. So if approved, the deck would be adjacent to the rear yards of the adjoining properties and should have no negative impact on the adjoining properties. The hardship is not self-created since the existing townhome structure was built on the existing lot, and we have not received any calls in opposition to this particular request. It has been properly posted with no site distance issues. So after reviewing the variance application, staff does support the request and recommends approval to reduce the rear setback from 30 feet to 15 feet with the following standard stipulation. Approval of the subject property for the requested variance shall be conditioned upon the development of the property and substantial compliance with the site plans submitted with the variance application. And I can answer any questions.
Any questions for Ms. Crowe? Thank you.
Thank you.
Sir, if you could step back up. So just like all the other ones, I'm going to ask you, you just heard Ms. Crowe read into record the one stipulation. Are you aware of that and in agreement with that stipulation?
Yes, we understand and agree.
Okay, thank you. This is a public hearing. If there's anybody here that'd like to speak for or against V20-072, I'd ask that you step forward at this time. Seeing no one, I'll entertain a motion.
Motion to approve V20-72, allow rear setback reduction from 30 feet to 15 feet, land lot 306, at address 1068 Oaks Parkway.
Second.
We have a motion to approve V20-072 that's been properly seconded. If there's no further discussion, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor of the motion? Motion passes unanimously. So I'm going to go back to item 3A. Is our applicant present now? Okay, so the applicant is present. So I'll call back item 3A, privilege license agent ownership change request, LIC 2021-21, beer, wine, and liquor retail package, 1651 Roswell Street, Nadia 4 LLC, DBA GNN Package Store with Gautam Debnath as agent. Is the applicant present?
Mr.
Good morning.
Chairman,
I'm sorry.
would we need to vote to remove this from being a tabled item before it is addressed?
So I'm getting a no to that. So
Okay.
we're good procedural wise. We're good with the way we're doing it. Okay, thank you. Good morning, sir.
Good
If you
morning,
could
sir.
please state your name for the record.
My name is Gautam Devnath.
Okay. So if you could please describe for this board your role with the business GNN Package Store. What is your responsibility?
There is a product called selling
You may
liquor,
have to remove your mask.
selling the liquor, beer liquor.
Okay, so are you the owner or are
Yeah,
you,
I'm the
okay,
owner.
so you're the owner of
Yes.
GNN Package Store?
Yes. I have also like cross street, like same property, I think, and we have another one also.
Okay, so are you the registered agent for the other property as well?
Yeah.
Okay, so could you describe for us practices that you have in place at your business to ensure the responsible sale of alcohol?
Yeah, so check ID is under 21, we cannot sell any of tobacco product or alcohol.
Mhm. And what type of training do you have
We
for
took
your staff?
we took the training class of last time. We took the class of the beer license.
Okay. So are you aware that in the city of Smyrna, there are undercover operations conducted by the police department to ensure that businesses sell alcohol responsibly?
Yes.
And if anyone is caught in violation of those laws, the person who sells to underage people is subject to be arrested?
Yes,
Okay. And any questions for the applicant?
No, sir.
Okay. So we do have record where the applicant has successfully completed all requirements with regard to the responsible sale of alcohol certification. Also, for the record, a background investigation was done into the applicant, and there was nothing found that would preclude the issuance of this privileged license. So with that being said, I'll entertain a motion for LIC 2020-21.
Make a motion to approve privileged license, agent ownership change request, beer and wine liquor retail package 1651 Roswell Street, Nadia 4 LLC, DBA GNN package store with Guten Dibna as agent.
Second.
We have a motion to approve item 3A. It's been properly seconded. If there's no further discussion, all those in favor of the motion? Motion
you, sir.
passes.
Thank
Motion
you, sir.
passes. Thank you. Good luck.
thank you.
Last item on the agenda is item 4A, which is the approval of the November 11th, 2020 License Variance Board meeting minutes. Do I hear a motion to approve?
Motion to approve minutes from November 11th, 2020 License and Variance Board meeting.
Second.
We have a motion to approve the minutes that's been seconded. If there's no further discussion, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor of the motion? Motion passes unanimously. We'll adjourn at 11:01.